What if the darkest aspects of human psychology aren't as uniquely human as we once believed? Imagine a wolf spotting an injured elk, exhausted and barely able to run. The wolf closes in, brings the animal down, and begins to eat while it's still alive. No one watching would call that wolf evil. Now, imagine a human doing the exact same thing. The reaction changes instantly. One is seen as nature, the other as monstrous. For centuries, humans have treated cruelty as something almost exclusively ours. Animals kill out of necessity, while humans kill by choice. Or so the story goes. But every so often, an animal's actions blur that distinction. An orca launches a seal into the air repeatedly, only to let it slowly sink beneath the waves. A dolphin harasses a smaller marine mammal for hours, with no apparent reward. A chimpanzee executes a coordinated attack against a rival, long after victory is assured. When stories like these surface, people often reach for the same explanation. Maybe some animals are psychopaths. The idea might sound absurd. Psychopathy, after all, is a human psychological condition. Animals don't visit therapists, nor do they fill out questionnaires. No lion has ever been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. Yet, the question persists, especially as scientists began studying psychopathy more closely. They discovered that several core traits associated with it are not, in fact, uniquely human. And once you start looking for those traits in nature, you find some surprisingly familiar patterns. The first problem is that psychopathy is often misunderstood. Movies often portray psychopaths as criminal masterminds plotting elaborate schemes. Real psychopathy is far less dramatic. Researchers generally describe it as a collection of traits: reduced empathy, fearlessness, a tendency towards manipulation, and a weak sense of guilt. Many individuals who score highly on psychopathy tests never commit violent crimes. The crucial element isn't violence itself, but rather how one mind responds to another. This, however, presents an enormous challenge. How do you measure such internal states in an animal? Scientists cannot ask a dolphin if it feels remorse, nor can they interview a tiger about empathy. Instead, they must search for clues hidden within behavior. One of the strongest clues comes from a surprisingly simple observation. If one individual becomes distressed, does anyone else care? Humans show signs of this almost immediately after birth. A crying infant can trigger distress in other nearby infants, as emotional states spread through a group. For a long time, many researchers assumed this was uniquely human. Then, experiments began. Rats encountering trapped companions often work to free them, even without an obvious reward. Elephants sometimes linger for hours beside injured herd members. Certain primates appear visibly agitated when close companions suffer. Even laboratory mice react differently when pain is experienced by a familiar animal versus a stranger. None of this definitively proves animals experience empathy exactly as humans do, but it strongly suggests that many species are not emotionally indifferent to one another. The suffering of another individual can, indeed, matter. And if empathy exists, an intriguing possibility emerges. Could some individuals possess less of it than others? Nature thrives on variation. Researchers studying fish, for instance, have repeatedly observed some individuals charging into unfamiliar situations, while others consistently hold back. These differences often remain remarkably stable over time. In essence, animals appear to have personalities, not in the human sense of favorite movies or political opinions, but consistent behavioral tendencies that make one individual predictably distinct from another. Once this idea gained acceptance, scientists posed a new question. Could traits resembling psychopathy simply represent one end of a broader behavioral spectrum? Evolution suggests they might. A population composed entirely of cautious individuals misses opportunities, while one made solely of fearless individuals risks annihilation. Natural selection often favors a mixture, meaning traits that seem harmful in one context can become advantageous in another. Fearlessness is a prime example. In humans, unusually low fear can contribute to psychopathic behavior. Yet in nature, this very characteristic can help an animal secure food, territory, mates, and status. This brings us to chimpanzees. For decades, many believed that violence on the scale of human warfare required something uniquely human. However, as researchers began documenting chimpanzee societies in greater detail, the picture grew more complex. Chimpanzees form alliances, compete for status, and remember past interactions. When conflicts erupt between neighboring groups, the violence can be startlingly organized. Members of larger patrols sometimes seek out isolated rivals, attacking only when victory seems almost certain. To human observers, this strategy feels disturbingly familiar. Yet, labeling these animals as psychopaths presents a challenge. Their actions still serve clear evolutionary purposes. Territory expands, resources become more accessible, and reproductive opportunities increase. The violence, though brutal, isn't necessarily pointless, and that distinction matters profoundly. One reason people find psychopathy unsettling is the apparent disconnect between suffering and purpose. When cruelty seems detached from practical goals, it feels fundamentally different. This is where dolphins enter the conversation. Dolphins possess some of the largest brains relative to body size in the animal kingdom. They recognize themselves in mirrors, solve complex problems, and maintain social relationships that can persist for years. Researchers have documented temporary alliances, shifting coalitions, and forms of cooperation requiring sophisticated social awareness. Yet, dolphins also have a reputation for behavior that can seem deeply unsettling. In several locations worldwide, dolphins have been observed attacking porpoises. These incidents don't appear connected to feeding. The victims are often left uneaten. Scientists still debate the underlying cause, with competition, redirected aggression, and social dynamics all proposed. What no one can say with certainty, however, is what the dolphins are experiencing internally, and that uncertainty highlights the biggest obstacle in this entire discussion. Behavior alone is insufficient. Imagine two people performing the exact same action. One is consumed by intense guilt afterward, while the other feels nothing. From the outside, their behavior appears identical, but internally, their experiences couldn't be more different. Psychopathy is largely defined by what happens inside the mind. That inner world remains challenging to access even in humans, and accessing it in animals is vastly harder. A cat playing with a mouse offers a perfect example. To us, the scene appears cruel. The mouse repeatedly escapes, only to be recaptured, its suffering seemingly obvious. But the cat may not be deriving pleasure from suffering itself. The behavior could simply reflect hunting instincts, evolved over millions of years. What appears sadistic from a human perspective may be something entirely different from the cat's. The inherent danger is that humans are exceptionally adept at projecting their own motives onto non-human minds. We tend to see intention where none exists, imagine emotions that may not be present, and assume familiar mental processes behind unfamiliar behaviors. Scientists expend enormous effort to avoid this trap. The more they learn, the stranger the picture becomes. Animal minds are neither simplified versions of human minds, nor entirely alien systems. They occupy an uncomfortable middle ground. This brings us back to our original question: are there psychopaths among animals? At the moment, nobody knows for certain. There are undoubtedly animals that display traits associated with psychopathy. Some individuals appear unusually fearless, others exceptionally aggressive, and a few exhibit levels of social manipulation that would be impressive even in a corporate boardroom. What remains uncertain is whether these traits combine into the same distinct psychological package that defines psychopathy in humans. The answer may eventually be yes, or it may be no. Either possibility would teach us something profound, because the true mystery isn't whether animals resemble us, but precisely where that resemblance ends. Psychopathy may ultimately prove to be another example of a trait we once believed belonged exclusively to humanity. For now, all we can confidently say is this: the next time you witness an animal's action that feels cruel, remember that cruelty isn't merely an action. It is also a state of mind. And while scientists have become surprisingly adept at observing what animals do, the intricate thoughts behind those actions remain one of the last great mysteries on Earth.